Hello, Sean. Hello, Meech. Hello, Devo. Hello, Kyle. Thanks for joining us. And we will get started in just a minute here. Let me stop recording real quick. Or I should say stop screen sharing, and I will put that new one up presently. Okay, I think we are good to start. So first, let me thank everybody for coming to Community Democracy Project's Community Conversation Hour. My name is Blake. I'm a CDP member, and I thank you again very much for coming to From Fighting the Power to Being the Power, 4 tools to reclaim the initiative process. I'll be your MC today, and some of other CDP members will be hosting other sections. So first, we'll start off with Zoom keeping. If you require ASL interpretation, thank you to Lisa Washington, our interpreter. You can click the 3 dots on your Zoom toolbar and click Pin Video on Lisa Washington's video to see them at all times. We'll start with our community agreements as well. One diva, one mic means when one person is speaking, we'll all pay attention to them and pass it around. Be aware of time. It's pretty self-explanatory. Be curious. We'll be exposed to new things, new ideas, and it's good to keep an open mind towards those. Distinguish between intent and impact. The words and actions that we always do, people can't necessarily understand our intent. We have to make that understand that there's a difference between what we're intending to say and what our actions and words actually do. We're in a community right now, so communicate for community, but speak for yourself. We can all ultimately only speak for ourselves and our experiences. No one knows everything. Together we know a lot. That's exactly what CDP is all about, collective imagination. Move up means if you feel that you haven't been speaking or participating a lot, move up and participate. And if you feel like you've been speaking too much or participating a lot, taking up space, feel free to move up and step back. And then finally, we're humans. We can't always be articulate. And the last thing is our anti-oppression agreement. So we have this at the beginning of every CCH and meeting. We are committed to supporting our volunteers in maintaining a space free of harassment and oppressive power dynamics. If someone or something is or has been harmful or upsetting for you, we want to know. We'll make space for discussion. We'll think critically about any incidents so that we can support growth in learning without tolerating bullshit. If you have anything that you'd like to contact us about for conflict, you can email our conflict resolution team at the email right there. In today's agenda, we will be briefly going over CDP, Community Democracy Project, and the People's Budget Initiative, Direct Democracy 101, 4 tools to reclaim direct democracy, our fishbowl conversation about the 4 tools, and then close out and announcements. And for the next section, we'll pass it over to CDP members Sean and Allison.
Awesome, thanks, Blake. Yeah, just to give everyone a quick rundown of CDP. We're an all-volunteer grassroots campaign, and we're working to turn Oakland's city power structure right side up through real structural change. And the group has been organizing together since 2011 and grew out of the Occupy movement. And toward that mission of promoting active citizenship and direct democracy, we're trying to empower Oakland citizens by amending the city charter through a ballot initiative so that anyone 16 or up who lives here can vote directly on the city budget. That's regardless of documentation status or previous incarceration. And then residents will then come together to discuss, debate, and vote on how they want their tax dollars spent at neighborhood assemblies. And together, these would kind of inform what would ultimately be the people's budget. And our initiative would change the process so that the budget would actually reflect the values of the city that we live in. Currently, it's kind of a pretty unaccountable process where the mayor and city council come up with a budget proposal and ultimately pass with minimal input from people who actually live in the city. So by giving people an opportunity to directly decide how they want their tax dollars spent, it gives us an opportunity to have a city that actually reflects our values and truly prioritizes safety by giving everyone an equal say in how much they want things to be funded for services like housing, libraries, community ambassadors, mental health services, and fixing potholes. And there's over 7,000 cities in the world that use a method similar to this, known as participatory budgeting. First implemented in, I think, 1989 in Porto Alegre, Brazil, and it was a huge success. Pretty much quadrupled the number of schools, increased sewer connections, child mortality dropped. And you might hear say that there's already participatory budgeting in Oakland, but it's a very limited amount that's mostly focused on small projects. And our initiative would be the first in the country to put the entire city budget in the hands of the people. And to provide more details on the actual People's Budget campaign, I will pass it over to Sean.
Thanks, Allison. One thing I would add too about our initiative, a key part of our initiative is changing the culture of politics, right? So it's not just people voting on some numbers abstractly. It's about people relating differently to each other through neighborhood assemblies established throughout the city where people get together on a regular basis, face to face with each other to talk about the issues in the community in the larger city. Change the relationship they have to power, change the relationship they have to each other, so that instead of seeing each other as competitors for scarce resources in the consumer rat race, they see each other as collaborators in co-creating the kind of community and the kind of city they want to live in. So shifting the political culture from one of spectatorship and elitism to one of participatory, real grassroots participatory democracy and solidarity. So by changing our relationships to each other and to the government. And a big part of our campaign, because we're doing an initiative process, it's really about sort of embodying the principles of participatory democracy and even our approach, so that the people, instead of asking for the powers that be to do the right thing, we're pushing for the people to make the demands to make the change that needs to happen. So that's a key part of why we're doing a voter initiative. I think, I'm sorry, Allison, you want me to respond to one more point, and I want to make sure is that good, or is there another? Okay. Oh, so lessons learned from the campaign, right? I'll quickly do this. I'm sorry about that. I was like, okay, what else do we need to say? We've learned a lot through our process over the last 10 years of both a coalition building and actually working on to get the initiative on the ballot. For those who don't know, the way initiative campaigns work is once you start gathering signatures, you have a fixed amount of time to gather a certain number of signatures. For a charter amendment, you need about 15% of the registered voters in the city to sign your petition to get it on the ballot. In practice, because of validity issues, you need a little bit more than that. Maybe people move since they registered to vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so in our last attempt to get this on the ballot, our very first attempt, we got like maybe 1,000 signatures. This is in 2012. So we've been ramping up. In 2019, we got around 38,000 signatures. So we were really, really close to getting our target. So we've been growing and learning in our as an organization about how to win. And so we're ready. And then the pandemic hit, of course, and all signature gathering stopped because, right, you know, the pandemic. So here we are now, ready to ramp up to take all the learning and power we've built over the last 10 years and finally make this happen.
Cool. Thanks, Sean. Allison, this is Neil from CDP. I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about this tool of direct democracy that we are using at CDP, the ballot initiative, to, you know, this reflection period because of COVID that sort of stopped us from relaunching our campaign after we got so close, caused us to sort of like look back on the process itself and what structural changes could be made to the process as a whole so that not only would our campaign have a higher likelihood of success, but other people-powered campaigns, grassroots campaigns would have more success getting on the ballot. So we'll do a quick rundown of the initiative process itself, and then talk about the tools that we think we can use to make the kind of structural change so that we can level the playing field or even prioritize grassroots campaigns over the current sort of corporate domination of the ballot process. So the initiative process in California was created in 1911, riding this wave of populism through the campaign of this person running for governor called Hiram Johnson. And he was kind of, you know, countering the established power of the time. Like you could think of the Uber of the time was the Southern Pacific Railroad, which had so much political power and just controlled everything. Like it was referred to as the octopus because it just sort of like controlled everything or just had that kind of impact on politics in California. And there was a lot of discontent because of that. So he ran on this platform basically that says, the thing I'm going to do is give the power back to the people. And so he won, and they did create the initiative process. And one of the first initiatives that actually was brought to the ballot and passed was to abolish poll taxes in California in 1914, which was, for me at least, a pretty cool use of the tool like early on. Side note, I will just say that as progressive as he was for the time, this is the same governor that 1 year before the poll taxes were abolished, passed the California Alien Land Law, which prohibited people of Asian descent from owning property or even in some cases leasing property. So progressivism and racism, not totally separate things at that time. But anyways, the process continued, and over time, because there weren't safeguards put in place and because for whatever reason, I'm not clear on what those historical reasons are, the process wasn't sort of protected from these intrusions. We have a process that's really come to be dominated by people with money instead of the people ourselves, such that in this last election cycle, the initiative spending broke records and campaign spending broke records, and just one initiative, Prop 22, which was funded by Uber, Lyft, Postmates, and Instacart primarily, four tech companies. They spent something like $220 million just on that one campaign to create their own law, basically to write their own law. And as I heard someone else put it, the initiative process, some of the flaws with it and how we've set it up, or how it was set up, is that in some senses, once something passes by initiative, we essentially can't make those changes. And so in a way, we can see ourselves as being governed by ghosts instead of governed by ourselves. You can go to the next slide, Blake. So fundamentally at CDP, we believe that we have the right to govern ourselves as the people. And so the People's Budget Initiative is one example of that kind of political agenda and tool that we can use. And we haven't really been able to exercise it both in the representative system, where we elect people and then they go off and do things that either align with what we want them to do or not, or in the direct democratic system. But the tool itself exists. And so I think that's what we're excited about, is that there's an opportunity right now, as more and more people get engaged and are discontent with the current political system, to make some changes and bring back and reclaim the power of the people through direct democracy. Because representation, people get elected and then they, go into office and they start basically running for re-election right away. But once people come together to set a political agenda and to find shared interests and find success with that, and sort of plug themselves into a movement for social change, that lasts forever and can't be stopped. And one of the promises of direct democracy is that instead of constantly reacting to the political agenda, like Sean was saying, we can actually set it ourselves. So for me, for example, these are things that I want. I want to see a Green New Deal. I want to see rent cancellation. I want to see police defunded. And there seems to be increasing support and sometimes overwhelming support for these ideas and for these issues. But instead of seeing them as they're proposed by people in the grassroots, by movements, the way that we see them get compromised and sort of chopped up and proposed, if at all, is this sort of forced compromise that we have to work through in the current system. And if we were able to put a Green New Deal on the ballot, and if the movements and the organizations that were working on those kinds of campaigns saw that as a viable path to promote and to pursue, that we would actually be able to possibly see the real issues on the agenda, instead of voting for like whether or not doctors should be at dialysis clinics, which is something so particular and technical that we are supposed to understand how to vote on, but can't really. But those are the kinds of issues that show up on the ballot right now because there's people with money behind those campaigns to actually put it there. So I'm going to talk about 4 tools that we think are going to re-legitimize the ballot initiative process, that we hope to hear from all of you on later on. So the first is e-signature gathering, allowed e-signature gathering. This thing is allowed in other states already, and people actually here in California have considered adopting something like this. So what it would do is essentially right now we're required to go out in person, sign petitions, and collect signatures on pen and paper, and e-signatures would allow people to sign and support petitions for initiatives that they want to see on the ballot online. One reason to do it is because of the pandemic. We've learned that signature gathering in person essentially stopped or is going to be very, very difficult, even as the pandemic recedes or people become vaccinated. The legacy of the sort of like feeling of social distance might make something that people already kind of like, if you've ever been at their signature gathering, the biggest hurdle is to just get people to come up to you. And after this era of social distancing, that's going to be even harder. It also makes getting on the ballot more accessible for people-powered initiatives, because you can both gather signatures in person and online. Or if you're someone who's homebound or can't exert the physical effort of being out there and signature gathering in person, you can participate in this process. You can participate in a campaign that you care about by gathering signatures online. And some of the considerations around why this is feasible at this moment is, one, response to COVID and other states and cities sort of implementing this. We have some political leaders that are actually interested in these kinds of structural changes. Assemblymember Alex Lee has introduced legislation to get money out of politics and has expressed interest in similar tools for the initiative process and to sort of like right the scales there. And there are organizations that have been working on this and are interested in this as well. And where we can make this change, we think either locally or statewide, but we need to do more research. So we'd love to hear if people have thoughts on that or know where and how this particular change can be made. You can go to the next slide, Blake. The second is to lower the threshold of how many signatures people-powered campaigns need. So when I say people-powered, I mean volunteer-led campaigns, where the majority or vast majority of people who are out there working for the campaign are volunteers. And so the change would essentially create a sort of like split level requirement. Right now, no matter what kind of campaign you run, you have to get the same number of signatures to get on the ballot. And so right now, with signatures costing $7 a signature to pay for a firm to do it, for example, for us, if we didn't have the people power that we do, but we wanted to get on the ballot, we would have to pay $300,000 in signature gathering fees just to get on the ballot. So that's why we see these, large, well-funded interests being the only ones really to get initiatives locally or statewide on the ballot. It just costs too much. And fundamentally, like, access to the ballot should be available to people over corporations. That was the intention of the tool in the first place. So right now, for example, in Oakland, for us to get on the ballot, we need 15% of the electorate. So that 36,000 number that Sean was saying, that's how many valid signatures we need to gather. Whereas if Google wanted to put something on the ballot, they would just have to gather that many too. We think that people-powered campaigns like ours and others should be able to get on the ballot a little bit easier, because the people should be able to set the political agenda more so than people who just have access to a lot of money. And so, for example, Denver requires just 5%. And one of the concerns that people share is that, like, this is going to skyrocket the number of initiatives that are on the ballot. And so we're going to vote on 500 initiatives. And it hasn't been the case there. So there's not a whole lot of evidence to suggest that it would be automatic that would happen. It's still super hard to collect even 5% of the signatures. But the change would probably need to be made statewide in order for that to be able to happen, even in Oakland, because that's the way the law is set up. The law around this is at the state level, so that's where the change would need to be made. Next slide, please. The third is to extend the timeline to make it more realistic for how long you have to gather signatures. So this is another part of the campaign that we learned from this last time around, is that you have 180 days to gather the 36,000 signatures, or at the state level, it's something like close to 1 million signatures. And what we've heard from people who've worked on similar campaigns and what we've experienced is that that's really hard, especially, again, for campaigns that are run by volunteers. And it's not clear why that limit exists in the first place, why it's 180 days. So it'd be good to know what the reasons were. Maybe there are some good reasons, but it feels arbitrary. And given the realities of how much daylight there is, which are things that we have to think about when we're out signature gathering in person, like when people are actually out and gathering, extending that, for example, for our campaign 2 years ago, by like 4 to 6 weeks would have made a difference, because we were that close. So we don't have a sort of suggestion of like how long we need it to be extended, but we know that extending the timelines would make it more feasible for people-powered campaigns to actually qualify and get the number of signatures that they need to get on the ballot. And we think that this is also a state level change that would need to happen. And then the last is something that we have already talked about in the state and that we've seen happen in school board elections, and it's kind of growing, is to involve young people in direct democracy. I think one of the critiques of the political culture here that is common is that like we aren't taught to be politically engaged and active. So one way outside of school to sort of do that is to allow people who are 16, 17 to both gather signatures and vote on local and or statewide initiatives. Since, like I was saying earlier, it's so hard to change these initiatives that we end up binding future generations by decisions that are made 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so people who are going to be living their lives in those future generations should also have a say and should also be able to participate in sort of determining what those rules are going to be. So we could just tag on to the growing sort of culture of including young people in elections through school boards or in primaries by including them in the direct democratic process too. And that would probably also be a state level change. So, okay, I went through a lot. So I'm just going to recap. Here are the 4 changes that we're excited about, that we've talked to other organizations about. One is to allow e-signature gathering, lower the signature threshold for people-powered campaigns, adopt realistic campaign timelines, and then of course involve young people in direct democracy as well. And so we're excited to hear what folks have to share in response or excitement about any of these. So we're going to transition to a fishbowl conversation right now, and I'll pass it to Tia to explain that.
Hello, everyone. Apparently I can't spotlight myself, so if someone else can do that, thank you. Awesome, welcome. So the Community Democracy Project is all about making our meetings and events as participatory as possible. And so we chose this fishbowl format because it requires a lot of participation from both the presenters and you, our audience. I'm going to explain how this format works because it might be different from what you've seen in other Zoom meetings. If you've ever seen something like this in person, usually there are 3 to 4 people in the middle and they're in a circle while everyone else is watching them as if they were in a fishbowl. And I've usually seen this format be used when there are 2 opposing sides trying to find common ground, but here we're just using it to gather your questions and feedback. And this is different from a Q&A or town hall because instead of being limited to 1 question and answer at a time, you can go back and forth, ask more questions, and respond to each other as much as you need. And unlike in a panel discussion, anyone can join the spotlight. So we think this is a great tool to practice to model active engagement, and we hope it'll be a great tool for our future neighborhood assemblies. I'm just going to copy and paste the rules in the chat, and I'll read it out loud as well. To join the middle, all you have to say is you're going to tap in. Only 2 to 4 people can have their microphones on at a time. I will let you know when you can join the fishbowl, and once you're in, feel free to keep yourself unmuted so that the other fish can hear your reactions or your giggles, so it's not just quiet when they're talking. And if you've been in the fishbowl for a long time and you see that someone is trying to tap in, please type "I'm tapping out" in the chat room, in the chat. Mute yourself to officially leave the middle, and that will let me know that I can tap someone else in. So we have asked volunteers to join the middle with Neil first, and I think it was Patricia who volunteered. So I'm going to spotlight Patricia and take out the spotlight on myself and keep Neil in the middle because he's the one who presented. And if anyone else wants to join, just let us know. And I think it would be best if you also stop sharing the screen, Blake.
All right, here we are in the fishbowl. So it's me, Patty, swimming in the fishbowl, and Neil. And like Tia said, feel free to jump in. But I guess I was going to start off just by saying that I learned a lot from that presentation because I don't know some of like the history and the legal structure of how initiatives get passed and all that. But from the 4 strategies, the one that I'm most excited about is the 4th one of like engaging youth and like getting them involved in democracy. And that's personally because I work at the public library, I work with youth, and I just think that it's a really important part of our work because they have a lot of really good ideas and they have a lot of energy and commitment to making things better. So that's the strategy that I tend to like gravitate towards or like be more interested in. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that part of this work I realized too is that like there's like that mind shift of like what power means and like how we can take power or like activate our inner power like at the individual level. And I think that's an important part of this work and one of the reasons why I became involved with CDP. I just joined last year and I have yet to collect signatures, but I'm really excited about doing that and engaging with the community, especially with youth, to like get more involved in like changing the way that our budget is decided. And I see we got some new fishes coming in. Emily, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I love hearing you talk about getting youth involved, and I realized I wanted to kind of like tag on and talk about the one that was most exciting to me, which was like getting digital like e-signatures statewide. It just seems like such an obvious solution to a lot of the challenges that the people are facing. And my frustration is that if it is secure to have our banking and our taxes all done online, I don't understand why it's like impossible to get petitions done online. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
Yeah, we sign documents all the time online, or at least it's done all the time. I'll share that I think I started out being most excited about lowering the threshold just because it was so much work for our campaign a couple of years ago to get where we got. And I think it's, I think that for me, that feels like it might change the game a bit in terms of like the success that campaigns could have and the way campaigns and movements and organizations see the tool. But I would say that after kind of like putting this together and our conversations, I think I'm with Pati that like the longer term goal really is served by like just expanding who has a say and who can participate. And one thing I learned was that actually in, because a lot of times young people are like given almost tokenized, like be an advisor, like join this advisory council, and they give good ideas, but then there's no like accountability to them to actually do the thing. The adults aren't actually necessarily bound to do the thing. But there's a city in the Salinas Valley, Gonzalez, and they have a youth city council, like separate and apart from the city council, that actually has like authority to like pass laws and spend money, which I thought was so cool. And it's a city, a small city of maybe 10,000 people. It's not very big, but one, it was like the like creative ways to include people aren't limited to places where you might expect, and that it's like that just seemed like a great like accountable way to have young people participate. And then the last thing I'll say is like out signature gathering, it's oftentimes the younger people that are like the ones that are more interested to come up to you and like hear about what it is that you're saying. And then I have to ask, how old are you? And then they tell me, and I'm like, oh, maybe next year you can sign. But I'd love to be able to say, yeah, like you can sign this petition. Do you want to join us in gathering signatures? Because there's a lot of, and we're gathering oftentimes in the summer. So people have time. Yeah. So I think I'm most now excited about that one.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I really like the point that you said about how youth are sometimes tokenized and like just used as part of like this theater of like, oh yeah, we have youth involvement in this one committee or task force. But I love that about this campaign, that it would be like legit power that people can get involved with. And then there was, oh, the other point I was going to make is that one thing I'm excited that CDP is doing is launching the School for Organizing. And that's another way that people can engage with this work, but also just like personally like find areas that you want to improve on, like public speaking or organizing an event, or areas that you want to be better at, and learn from other people that have been organizing before or maybe have not been organizing, but just ways to like network with your neighbors or people that are doing this work. And so we're going to have an event on Wednesday, but we'll share all the details in the chat later. I wanted to swim out and let someone else join the fishbowl to hear other voices. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Patty. And hi, welcome to the fishbowl, Greer.
Thank you. Hello. I find all four of these ideas super exciting. I work at Consumer Watchdog. For context, I've met Blake and Neil before. Hi, and Tia. I just wanted to say that I know that my boss Carmen at Consumer Watchdog has mentioned that she thinks that it could be a good idea to try to locally change the provisions of the initiative process in Oakland, so that you can change the threshold for signatures and things like that, and that could serve as some sort of like pilot project that then legislators could see like, oh, this works locally. I don't know the technicalities of how that works. And I am not sure if she spoke with you guys already about the idea of like locally changing the Oakland charter, but that's an idea.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding us about that. I think that Carmen actually said that she might have more people looking into that to help us figure out whether or not that's actually possible. So it's still kind of an open question, but that would be great, so that Oakland could be the laboratory for something like this, and then see it spread elsewhere. Oftentimes that's how it works. People want to see it work one place, and then they feel more comfortable implementing it wherever they are. And I mean, it would be right in line with what Oakland is, to sort of be the first to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I will follow up with her and try to figure out where she's at with reaching out about that. Yeah.
I'm going to jump back for just a second to what Neil had said about tokenizing youth, and Patty already commented on this, but that also stuck out to me, that like these tokenizing attempts to include and involve youth, but not actually giving them any power, just having it be sort of symbolic. It reinforces the idea that they don't have any power. And that's, I think, emblematic of like the whole problem, is that when we don't have participatory governance, just representative, then any attempts to like make it seem more palatable just kind of reinforces that you don't have that participatory decision making power, and when people feel like their voice isn't heard, then they're less likely to be involved. So it's just this negative cycle of powerlessness that is by design.
For sure. I think the other thing that I did say earlier, that just to like sort of spread the love on each of these, is like extending the timelines. That one is like, maybe sounds a little technical, but I think part of the experience of people working in campaigns, and Nicole from 50+1 Strategies was sharing this with us in the last community conversation hour, was like the challenge of, getting people to sign something, like sometimes and often will involve like learning about it. Some people will just sign because they want to do that and they want to go do their grocery shopping. And then sometimes it's an opportunity to like engage with people and like have conversations. And we've gotten people to, get really excited about it, or we've had people say some really vile things to us. You never know, but there's, this short timeline of 180 days is like, you got to do both the signature gathering and the political education to get people up to speed on the issue. And if there was more time to do that, then when you go into the next phase to actually start to talk to people about whether or not they should vote on something, there's like already going to be more of a higher baseline of understanding among people about whatever the issue is. And I think that's another goal with direct democracy, or with what we're bringing to, the people's budget, is that just like we bring both people's practical realities more into our politics, and also bring politics more into our everyday life, and not have those two things be so separate from each other, so that there is like more of a connection and more of a sense of like my engagement matters in this issue. So I just wanted to like share that about that one, like why the timeline. So I think that was a good point. So I'm gonna tap out. I see Blake came in.
I love that way that Neil put that, was bringing politics into everyday life and everyday life into politics. I thought that was wonderfully said. Hi, Blake.
Hey, what's up? What do I want to say? When Neil mentioned in the history of the initiative process, that it was all about fighting the railroads, the octopus, and how deeply entrenched they were in all of Western politics, let alone California politics. To me, that like strikes me as just, I'm so offended and angry that Uber and so many of these rideshare companies spent so much money on the initiative process and really have removed so much of the people power. And all the interviews that LA Times and other outlets have done about I didn't know that this Prop 22 would actually hurt rideshare drivers, and they promised that they weren't going to raise prices if Prop 22 passed, and the prices went up anyways. Stuff like that just makes me so angry, and I think about the kind of populist energy that we can connect with and have a new progressive era. And to me, as one of the tools, I think all of the potential tools are so powerful. I think about the youth age limit, as especially in terms of like climate change. What we do now, I'm going to be dead in 80 years or whatever, right? Wait, no, I'm going to be way too old. I'll be dead in some amount of time, but there's still going to be teenagers who will be alive. They should have a choice in their actual in their lives and how society looks. And we've removed so much of that, not in only other avenues of our political participation, but also in signature gathering and initiative process. So I think for me, e-signatures as well. I work in government, and we use digital signatures all the time. COVID happened, and suddenly e-signatures are allowed, and everything that used to be 30 forms, triplicate, sign, initial, every single page. It really shows that this was just a choice that we can choose to do away with at any time. And I think e-signatures makes it so much more equitable. A lot of people don't do their own grocery shopping, or maybe they work a night shift and they do grocery shopping at a time where there's not normally signature gatherers there. So they don't have as much access to political participation in initiative process. So I think that, to me, those are kind of the two big ones that I'm all psyched up about.
Well, and especially during the pandemic, like we're not going to immediately go back to normal life. So this conversation about digital signatures is like really important right now, because there's a lot of people who can't participate and won't be able to for, we still don't know how long. If it helps, Blake, you will still be dead in 80 years. And I wanted to, you had brought up the Uber and Lyft, and that was the thing that was kind of just like, I mean, I know it's been bothering all of us, but talking about the shortness of the timeline and the extent of signatures required, it creates this like double hurdle that only the Ubers and the Lyfts with the $100 million deep pockets can clear, and it locks regular people who are just volunteering in their time off or trying to do this as a job out of the whole process. Hi, Devo. I can tap out.
I'm thinking of how that connects to what Neil was saying earlier about the like education aspect. Like the confusion around Prop 22, you can just pay so much money to get the signatures, but no one's educated and then they vote. Like I think some old CDP members were talking about voting a different way than they intended to on Prop 22. So yeah, like the people power campaigns, we can try to raise awareness outside of the campaign, but people don't really pay attention until you're in campaign mode. Like, because CDP's been around for like 10 years or so, and not everyone knows about it. So, but I don't know, I'm not feeling very articulate today, so I'll stop.
I was just joining to say I'm very curious about how we can, I would really like it if any change that was made to the initiative structure could both make it easier for people-powered campaigns like Community Democracy Project, and also make it harder for corporate campaigns. So I mean, I think that would be really nice, because I think that's also, I also feel very upset about what is happening to our initiative process with money and politics. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm jumping in just to bring up the Reimagined Task Force recommendations. And I'm not sure if everyone got a chance to follow that process, but it does mention participatory budgeting projects specifically in some of the recommendations. So that's number 48. It is a recommendation to ask that this group in particular, or a facilitation similar to what this group does, is involved in the next phase of the Reimagined Task Force recommendations. It might be an opportunity to continue to introduce ideas like the 4 that have been introduced here if the controls are at the city level. And there are a few more related recommendations that I think this group might be interested in, including number 45, which is implement a youth participatory budgeting process as well. So it's a good one to check out and maybe activate how this group might consider its role in some of these co-governance situations. I mean, I don't know. Does anybody have questions about that, or is this new information for you?
I've heard about it, but I'm wondering how do you get involved in the Reimagined Task Force? Or who would we call?
I had a seat at the table because I'm on the SSOC. It's the Safety and Services Commission, and we oversee Measure Z dollars. So I was nominated from my board over to this task force. Other folks were appointed by their city council person or the mayor.
Are there ways to get involved without being appointed?
Next week is the last meeting. So it's been every other week that we've had meetings, or public meetings for the task force. And we also had like 130 members of the public join as advisory board members and broke out into those meetings as well. So at this point, phase 1, at least, the process is ending and closing. These are the final recommendations that we'll be voting on next week. But you'll see that there's recommendation number 47 is to have a second phase of this of Reimagined Public Safety. The impetus for this was through the Defund Coalition. So it was to try to reduce OPD's budget by 150 million since it's such a big suck out of our general fund. So there's likely going to be a second phase to get involved, and some of these recommendations are calling out CDP and your processes to be directly involved as facilitators.
That is
I don't even know if they asked you. I thought Maureen Benson is somebody who has been writing some of the ones that mention participatory the scope.
I don't know, maybe other members. No. I've seen like some stuff come up, but yeah, it's I don't know, not being very articulate. I'll tap out.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing. I've been following some emails that we've received from people, but I don't know who was coordinating or who was sharing information. You said Maureen Fenson?
Right. It might be worthwhile because at the end of every recommendation is a contact information. So you could reach out to her directly, perhaps, see what her thinking might be. And I'm forgetting which ones were passed. We did pass, or we put on a consent calendar a group of recommendations already, and it's only like another group that we have to deal with one by one next week. So I don't remember if this was on it, but I can go back and look. These recommendations aren't hard ones to pass. It's more of like more of the ones that reduce policing that are harder to pass for this task force. But something that came up during this meeting today that I really appreciated was like just even the opening, like this is an anti-oppressive place, like space that we want to build, or ways to engage youth, because I think at this task force meeting, there is a youth advisory and 2 youth members sit on the task force itself. But the process itself and the facilitation has been from people in the criminal legal system, and from that lens and from the city, Robert's rule and just the city structure lens, it has felt very oppressive, and there are a lot of micro and macro aggressions that play out. Youth are just watching, probably horrified, and we're not accountable at all in the space. So just to flip that around is going to be really important to not leave everybody, especially young people who participate, feeling completely like the adults in Oakland are assholes. That's the sense I feel when I'm in this space.
Michelle, did you have anything that you want to say?
Yeah, well, it was kind of a separate topic, but I do think that's like an interesting point. I almost feel like it can be like worse to engage youth if, like y'all have said, you're gonna actually not give them power, because then it's not just a neutral impact, but then it's like a negative impact. It's like just oppressive. But yeah, I guess the question I was just wanted to ask, really to hear other people's opinions, like so I feel like a lot of these things are like really structural changes. And I'm curious to hear about what like mental, cultural, emotional changes people think we need, or if we need to like make to get these things passed. Because I feel like I know in myself sometimes I can think about things on like a systems level, but then in my own life I'm like, oh, do I want to like share this or be collective about this? And then I'm like, oh, is that different because it's my life, or is that just because it's easier to think about this when I don't have a change, like when I don't have a stake or something?
I think that kind of relates all back to what Nikki was bringing up about the recommendations. It's a little bit trite, as California goes, so goes the nation. We've always heard, which is true with Prop 22 stuff. Right now, they're trying to make similar laws all across the 50 states. I think that we all kind of have a personal stake in it, even though we might not feel like it emotionally. But like, I think that's kind of the system and mental change that we have to make about we're all connected. And some of these recommendations from the Public Safety Task Force could be around lowering initiative limits and expanding timelines, potentially e-signature gathering, because these are all ways that I think would engage more people in their collective governance, feel more a part of their community, feel safer. That's what it's about. It's about community safety, and you feel better about that when you have both like the emotional and mental buy-in, Michelle, that you were talking about, and also you're actually participating in it every day.
I would add to. Go. Did somebody go? It's a really trauma-filled space when we talk about, for Oakland at least, because so much of the budget is sucked up by police, so you have to address violence. And so being trauma-informed is part of that. And for me, I just really appreciate some of the recommendations because it makes it easier for folks to participate. Working folks who are most impacted in Oakland don't have the space in their lives to just participate on something like this. Like I have a special structure at work to allow me to participate in something like this at 12 o'clock on a Friday. And so I know I'm in a super privileged position with, all the benefits of speaking English can afford me, but that's not the case for the immigrant populations I know in Oakland. Right. And others, and just working class folks in Oakland.
And that relates a little bit to the cultural shift, I think, that Michelle was sort of like asking about. It's like, and this actually ties into what Patti was talking about with the School for Organizers. Part of what I've learned from, working in Oakland and just talking to people all over Oakland, going door to door at various points throughout our history, is when you learn by talking to people how to talk to people, right? You learn how to deal with different kinds of attitudes or personalities or different kinds of languages that people use, right? And you learn how to sort of be flexible in your responses because you're interacting with different kinds of people, right? But you learn by doing it. You don't learn by theorizing it, right? So democracy is a muscle that's learned through practice. Solidarity is a muscle that's learned through practice. Figuring out how to communicate across differences is a muscle that's learned through practice. So there's no shortcut. There's no summary that some smart politician is going to make for us and then we all feel good and sing kumbaya, right? It's going to be because the difficult person at a time, action at a time, right? Work of community building that happens, by thousands of us throughout the city over time. So and I want to give another plug. In that regard to the School for Organizers that we're launching on Wednesday. Definitely come Wednesday the 17th at 7 p.m. And Patti will, Allison will give more information about it because it's really about sort of us taking our impulses for democracy, our impulses to reach outside of our bubbles and developing easy week by week, month by month practices to grow those muscles and grow our awareness.
Yeah, I think seeing is believing. So the more we talk to each other about these things, the more we'll be able to envision it in our future. Yeah. And the more we practice, the more we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, it's challenging too, right? Because and this is not just about politics, right? I mean, I'm a part of this intergroup dialogue stuff in my college district. And there's all this great intention about how do we sort of like communicate across differences and deal with white supremacy and all these things. But the structure of the conversations is set up in a way that actually hasn't helped people get outside of their comfort zones. And so it's been hard, right? So it's like you have intention, right? It's intent versus impact, right? So I can't be too judgy because I know we're learning by doing, but hopefully our doing is iterative, right? So we do something and reflect on it and learn from it and take critical feedback and continue to grow. But these challenges of creating effectively doing difficult dialogue are throughout our culture.
I feel like that's a perfect point for us to end on. We're at time. We'll just use the last couple of minutes here. Thank you, everybody, for participating and sharing your voice. It's very valuable, and we thank you again for participating. There's plenty of ways that you can get involved. If you are stoked about making the initiative reform and re-legitimization happen, you can join our Community Democracy Project Ballot Dreams Action Team meetings. You can go to our calendar at hellapeoplepower.org and join the meetings from there. They're usually Wednesdays at 8:30. There's this Sunday we have a 30-minute discussion where we do a weekly topic of discussion every week, and we'll be discussing first response without police. So please, we would love to see your faces at that. And then next Wednesday, we're launching the Schools for Organizers, as Sean and Allison had been talking about. And this is a really good way to get in deep with your community and build up those muscles, just like going to a gym, build the muscles of democracy. And then finally, on Thursday, April 1st, we have our Cdp Orientation and Happy Hour. Come hang out, play some games, chill out with some cool people, I'd like to say, and learn about what we do. Thank you guys very much for coming. If you have any further questions, please email us or follow us at our socials, send us a DM, and you can always donate as well. Money makes the world go around in addition to people power.
Thank you, Blake. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll stop the
Thank you.
sharing and recording right now.